I'm pleased to present today's webinar, the third in our Welcoming Cities and Counties series, co-hosted with Welcoming America. Big Ideas, New York City's Blueprints for Immigrant Integration Success. I'm delighted to welcome today's guests who join us virtually from cities on 2 continents, New York, Berlin. Rachel is actually in Atlanta today, to help us learn about smart policy making, practical responses to community needs, and really innovative cross-agency programming from the City of New York's Blueprint Initiative. From New York, we have Fatima Shama, former Commissioner, New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, and from Berlin, Astrid Ziebarth, Director of the Migration and Society Program with the German Marshall Fund. So now please join me in welcoming Astrid Ziebarth, today's guest interviewer. Astrid is the Director of the Migration and Society Program at the German Marshall Fund. Based in Berlin, Astrid oversees the 3 signature projects of the program: its Migration Strategy Group on Global Competitiveness, the Transatlantic Trends Immigration, and the Transatlantic Forum on Migration and Integration. She also coordinates DMF's research program, networking, and leadership development in the areas of immigration, integration, and diversity. She is indeed, as to quote Rachel, a true pioneer and a woman of distinction. We're very lucky to have her with us today. Welcome, Astrid. I'll let you introduce our guest.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm also very delighted to be on this webinar. It's of course a shame that we only hear or don't really see each other, but as each one of the speakers is really also a true powerhouse and when you see us in reality. I'm very pleased to introduce, as she wasn't already termed, the godmother of immigration, Fatima Shama. She is the former commissioner of New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Fatima recently became the Vice President of Strategic Development and External Affairs at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. So it's New York's leading hospital and medical center. And prior to joining MMC, as it's also called, Fatima served as commissioner for the New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, leading the city's Office of Immigrant Affairs from 2009 through the end of 2013. Fatima joined the mayor's office in 2006 to lead a special initiative in public health on health literacy and language access, and then joined Deputy Mayor and then Chancellor Dennis Walcott's team as his senior advisor on education. So you can see there are many different public policy areas that she's really literate on to talk about. Fatima is a nationally recognized expert on municipal solutions for immigrant integration, making New York City a model and helping local, state, and national governments around the world. She has, if I may say, 20 years of experience in the public sector, and she works in the field of policy and advocacy in education and public health, workforce development, economic development, and health and human rights. She has a BA from Binghamton University, and she attended Temple Law School in Philadelphia and has a master's in public administration. And I'm very happy to be introducing you and now listening to your presentation, Fatima. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. This is quite an honor for me. Thank you, Astrid, for the introduction, Kim for hosting us at Cities of Migration, and my dear friends at Welcoming America, Rachel. It's really great to all be on the phone with you, although we're not in person. I get a giddy feeling just knowing that we're all together in sort of what I think is the opportunity to really be game changers in this incredible space. So to all of you out there joining us, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your day to learn with us and learn about some of the things we've been able to do in New York. As Astrid said, I no longer sit in the role of commissioner, but have the pleasure of doing that for many years, and really, I think with lots of colleagues and peers, quite honestly, many of whom are on the phone, really, I think together we've introduced a new way to have this conversation for the reality of our immigrant and migrant communities. So what I want to do with, for today's call, we've got a short amount of time to talk about a lot of things. I want to sort of give a background for what this office's mandate was. It's in front of you right now. And then I'm going to go through in a fairly quick way some sort of background data and then really what these blueprints are. And so, so the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs is a chartered office in the City of New York. We are written into the city's, if you will, constitution, which is a very big deal. We're the only city in the country that has a municipally chartered office that focuses on, in fact, the diversity of our communities and the reality that our immigrant communities need to thrive. And so our office's mandate was to really think about the policies and programs that successfully support our immigrant communities and their integration. What I want us to focus on right now is to really all of you in your respective cities have an opportunity to think about what value and what opportunity do you and can you benefit from the diversity of your population. I think sometimes in the United States anyway, as in most places actually, immigration is a federal mandate, it's a federal issue. But on localities, your responsibility is to really think about the folks that you support and that you work for. And so for us in New York, we really were able to think about immigration as a federal issue, but immigrants as a local issue. The human capital of the population that lives in our respective cities really is our responsibility. And how do we think about supporting them? Because the reality is that when we support our communities, whomever they are, they inevitably thrive and succeed and therefore support us. So in New York, we were very fond of saying, or we are fond of saying, when you support in communities, when you support immigrants, they support you. And so as we go through this, I want you to think a little bit about who you are and how do you measure yourself, to think about how do you get to where you need to support your community. Now, we don't have all the time to be able to really do a self-assessment, so I'm going to go through this quickly. I think it's important that when you start to figure out whether you can do this or not. Lots of questions. We will talk about whether there's money or there's not money and how do you begin this process. It's an overwhelming task. The first thing you need to do is really be honest with yourself as municipalities. What are you? What do you do? How well do you do it? And where do you need to grow? And sometimes you can't do all of them at the same time, but at some point you can actually do some fairly good assessments of yourself as a municipality, as a city, as an institution, wherever you want to begin that, and start to figure out that you actually have a number of things that might actually be already underway that you can value. So we're going to go through a number of these things. You see in front of you what we would identify as important measurements, and then you can identify whether you're strong or not at them. So diversity, right? Think about your community. Are you diverse? How do you measure yourself? Civic engagement. Can you see the robust diversity of your population in any number of different civic bodies in your community? How do you do as a municipality at welcoming, at really celebrating the diversity of your communities, really extending that hand that demonstrates you value those communities selecting your cities to live in? Welcoming America, who's on this call with us, does brilliant work and has amazing tools to help you understand how to create opportunities there. But think about yourselves and do you provide this opportunity? How do you measure yourself? And this is for you, right? We're not asking you to disclose anything, but it does give you a tool or a way anyway to begin thinking about where do you thrive, where do you need to amplify opportunities? And we'll get into why that matters in a couple of minutes. But how do you as a municipal, how do you provide opportunity for your immigrant community to access benefits, whether it's public benefits or other opportunities that can lead to their success? Healthcare is a big one these days. It's the one I'm focused on, but with the reality of Affordable Care Act in the United States or other opportunities, where do we help our immigrant communities, whether they're documented or undocumented, find access to services so that they can continue to live health and prosperous lives, but also be healthy so that they're actually not infecting other communities or themselves at a disadvantage, and causing more liability and more expenses actually to your system. Public safety, the ability of how does your police department have a relationship with your local immigrant community? Is that a place you think that matters? Does the diversity of your community, is that reflected in your engagement strategies with communities? The reality of employment and entrepreneurship. The U.S. reality of immigrants is that they're actually one of our most entrepreneurial communities in the country. In New York, half of our small businesses are owned by immigrants. What do we do to help support that? Again, when you invest in your community, they invest in you. And so that's an important thing for you to think about. Educational attainment, very important as we think about different measures of success. Most immigrant communities will tell you that the importance for themselves and their dreams, if you will, anywhere, I think this is a global phenomenon, is in fact education. They want their children to thrive. Here's the reality, though. I think Rachel said this. The truth is that when we hear about immigrants and immigration, it tends to be in a sense that is quite honestly not so positive. The reality that immigrants are taking over, that there are policies being put in place, like the Arizona policies that actually are going to stop the flow of immigrants, or quite honestly make the community incredibly unwelcome and untenable for immigrants to be able to want to be there. This nuance from a publication from Europe to deal with more immigration is to build fewer houses in the Southeast, right? You don't want them there, so what do? You don't actually help support them. We know that in the U.S. we're seeing a real new audience of immigrants move to places that had actually never known immigrants the way that many gateway cities do. So on the coast of the U.S., New York, California, Florida, if you sort of, as we like to think about them, these gateway cities, sort of along our border, if you will, these are the entry points that we have seen over time. We're now seeing the flow of immigrants into more and new audiences, right? They're what we are calling in the U.S. new gateway cities. Well, some of these cities are struggling with that reality. Here are four in particular that have seen really rising rates. So you see from 1970 what their percentage of foreign-born used to be, and now you sort of look at what it is today. In a place like Denver, they are seeing rates like they've never seen before of foreign-born. In the New South, in Memphis, in South Carolina, they're also, in Charlotte, they're seeing rates of immigration that they've never seen before. And this is causing, for many of you who might be on the phone, you may know this, but this is causing a disruption or confusion or neither, actually. It's causing an opportunity. And in fact, I think that's what we would like to share on this call, is that when you see that kind of demographic shift, it actually encourages the opportunity to recognize the assets of those communities, recognize your asset as a municipality, and how do you create opportunity for these communities? They've selected your city, so how do you help them thrive, given that they've chosen you over so many other places to be? So in New York, though we are a continuous gateway, we have been, it is our history, it is our narrative, the truth is that we ourselves have seen a very interesting demographic shift as well. So in the 1970s, you see a great number of European countries that were the sending nation for us. In 2010, that demographic reality looks incredibly different. Dominican Republic, China, Mexico, Jamaica, Guyana. You can see already that the languages, the ethnic traditions, the colors, the religion of these populations look very different. And so in New York, we've had our own reality of how do you deal with that? How do you in fact think about creating an opportunity that helps you thrive? So we just went through this very quick self-assessment. On your local level, there are ways to think about how do you create a municipal agenda? How do you create an opportunity to be competitive, to demonstrate globalization in the real way, and to quite honestly succeed? These are many cities that we are working with, that Welcoming America is working with, that are part of the Welcoming Cities and Counties agenda. But we know that these are places that have that are interested, that have asked for help, and that quite honestly are really great peers in this work. So if you're around them and you know them, reach out. Almost each one of them now has someone who was responsible for focusing on this immigrant agenda. Here are places where you can see some of the reality here, whether it's the Welcoming Dayton campaign or the fact that Chicago has an Office for New Americans, Houston has an Office for International Communities, Seattle has established an office. These are all really great examples of what's happening and what could be. When you think about creating your own agenda for your own municipality, there are things you want to think about. How do you enhance and ensure access for your immigrant communities? How do you build partnerships and think about what you as a city government can do, as a local government can do with your immigrant communities? How do you celebrate the contributions of those groups and recognize and give them an opportunity to thrive and feel recognized and valued? And then how do you create an entity or find the people that are fairly the experts in this in your respective places? In your respective cities, I bet that if you all took a bit of a review of your respective cities, you would find people whose natural inclination is to understand, whether it's people from these communities themselves or folks who know the importance of this work or want to be working on it. I'm now going to go through, I want to actually just introduce the blueprint. So we in New York have been doing this work. We care a lot about what we have been able to do, but we have started to get inquiries from, it started actually with Chicago, on how do we create an immigrant agenda for our communities. And what became very obvious to us was we had done a lot of fun things in New York, but it shouldn't be a secret. It's not our secret. And the reality of, and I'm going to sort of use this community organizing term, but when the community rises together, right? When we rise, we're tied together, it's actually when the ship can sail best. And so in the U.S., we've been having this immigration debate for a long time. And the truth is there's two ways that this can happen. We have to make sure that our communities across the country are being able to thrive, because then this nuance that immigrants aren't a valuable resource and a valuable part of our narrative and history can get celebrated. We were watching things explode across the country, whether it was in Arizona or Alabama. And the nuance is, how do we turn that story around? And so we in New York decided that we would create essentially a toolkit, a how-to guide on how do you create immigrant integration in your municipal government. And so we created the blueprint for immigrant integration. It's a series of 12 blueprints that provide essentially a guideline on how you can do this. It literally is written in a way that hopefully provides step-by-step guidance on this, but also uses New York as a case study. It's not a one-size-fits-all, so I want to be clear about that. But we hope that it provides some guidance on how you can do this. And so in this deck, there are 12 in total. There are 9 examples that I provide. One of them is on language access, recognizing that in your municipal, in your cities, you might have people who speak languages other than English. In New York, half of New Yorkers speak a language other than English. And the truth is that from a customer service perspective, how do we serve them in a way that we're actually recognizing their linguistic abilities, but also making sure that we are treating people with respect and dignity and not wasting municipal resources. And so we essentially have created a language access policy that is citywide and that encourages, or in fact forces, all city agencies to serve people in the languages they most comfortably speak. What you have in front of you is what we created as an I Speak card. And so it's something we give out at our city agencies to New Yorkers, to make sure that when they go shopping for services from city government or anywhere else, it's pretty clear that they can help somebody help them get the language resources they need. And we in New York encourage all city agencies to do that. This initiative that's in front of you is something called NY Certified. In figuring out the costs of what it means to provide interpretation and translation, they're very expensive, right, to do this and to do it well. Well, we knew that in the city of New York, where we actually employ 300,000 people, we knew that many of these individuals were in themselves reflective of our community. And so we decided to create a certification process to test people on whether their language skills were high and high enough to actually be quote-unquote certified. And we put them through a bit of a testing process. We got a little bit of money from the Annie Casey Foundation, so we thank Annie Casey every day that we can. And we were able to create this process. So New York City employees have gone through this testing process, and we now have people who themselves can volunteer their linguistic talents to help us better serve New Yorkers. what a difference it made in our workforce and them recognizing that we value their linguistic talent, and what a difference it made in our service delivery opportunity for people who come looking for help to be able to meet someone at the door who actually could serve them in the best way possible. So that's around language access. Citizenship. We all know that naturalization matters. And if we think about upward mobility in our communities, we know that naturalization has a direct correlation to upward mobility. The more that people naturalize, the greater reality of their own economic success, the greater investment in their families and in their commitment to their communities. So we in New York recognize that we actually had nearly, in the state of New York, we have nearly 1 million people who are eligible to naturalize. The vast majority were in the city of New York. And we in the city decided we were going to take advantage of that opportunity and think about how do we help support this audience. Again, the benefit was very much driven around the city in the sense that we said the more that we naturalize individuals, we know the greater tax benefits we will have as a city, the greater rates of home ownership, the greater reality of upward and income mobility, so lower rates of poverty, and we think, and in fact know, greater outcomes for educational success. Again, all things that are super important for a municipal to succeed, for a local, for a city and a county to succeed. So we actually partnered with our school system and created NY Citizenship in Schools. We were able to we got some funding from Citi, the bank, their community development arm. We partnered with 2 local entities here, one to provide free legal services, another one to help us create a loan fund. And we essentially went into communities to help them understand that they could get free legal and application assistance, to learn about fee assistant programs. And we wanted to make sure that we were helping people understand that they needed to be careful of immigration scams. So what you see in front of you are, in fact, a card that we created and that we gave out to any and every school that we could to help them understand this. Now, that's not something I would say that needs to happen off the bat for municipals, for cities, but I will say that because naturalization is an easy one, it's politically very easy to help you get your feet wet. Because you're giving services to a legal permanent audience, and so for many communities, that seems to be where you can start and not get into debates around documentation status and other things, and sort of investing in communities. And so think about how do you support your legal permanent resident communities and how do you help them naturalize, because we all know that voting matters, and not that I'm saying that's the outcome, but that's where you can get more support for many other things that you might need as a municipal government. So thinking along that strategic line is really important as well. Civic engagement. Civic engagement, I think lots of people define as sort of voter participation. We in New York don't define civic engagement that way, and I encourage you to think more broadly, largely because we do have a reality where we don't have folks who are eligible to vote, but we do need their voices in our communities. We need people to be at the table so that their voices matter and so that we can listen. But we needed people talking with and to each other. And so what we were able to do was to create essentially a civic engagement pipeline. We knew that when we looked at civic bodies across the city, we didn't see the vast diversity of our population. 60% of New York City's 8.4 million people are immigrants or the children of immigrants. And when you look at the bodies across the city, the sort of, if you will, local decision-making bodies, everything from a parent-teacher association to a community board, a land use board, you don't see that diversity. And what we needed to do was figure out why. So we started actually with going into communities and letting them know about their rights and responsibilities, and then thinking about how do we engage them in leadership development, and then really in a pipeline process. The final thing we ended with was something called Unity and Likely Grant Awards. And they were very small grants. They were micro grants of $3,000 that helped communities to work together, really helping them, communities, immigrants and non-immigrants, get together and focus on getting to know one another on a community-based level, but really crossing that divide. This could be yours, right? Anybody can do Unity grants, and in fact, we encourage it. In fact, these different engagement initiatives have happened across the country, whether it's Nashville for all of us, or the One Region campaign in Atlanta, or in Chicago's One Chicago, One Nation. So be creative, but think about ways to support your immigrant communities, help them understand their leadership matters, and quite honestly, help connect them to opportunities where their voices can be present. And then, of course, use their ideas. These communities all have brilliant ideas, and if you find someone, a community foundation, who can give you a little bit of money, create an opportunity where you can ask for those ideas and then honor them, even if it's in a small way. The impact is huge in your community. Economic development. There's no shortage of ways and data that supports the reality of what immigrants mean for us in the country. I like to define them as strivers. They're people who really do want to succeed. They work in New York. We say they're everything from the dishwasher to the chef in a restaurant to the person working, as the housekeeping in hospitals to the surgeon, performing the most complex procedures, right? And in fact, as a result of those two bookends, it's all the jobs in the middle that creates opportunity for our communities, for Americans, and so for our native population. We in New York did a couple of things where we surveyed our small business communities and then truly tried to figure out opportunities for it. We have a whole blueprint dedicated to that. I'm going to go through this a little quickly. Around police and community relations, we all know that secure communities have taken a toll. In the U.S., we have something where our federal government has sort of mandated many of our police departments on a local level to sort of do some fingerprinting, if you will. We in New York really, and most police departments across the country, with some exceptions, really do recognize the importance of creating and building relationships with communities. And so here you have a couple of examples of how we knew there were challenges in communities with our police department and ways to sort of create opportunities. So our police department, under its community affairs arm, created something called the New Immigrant Outreach Unit, where they, not a large unit, but it's for such a large city, but essentially identified some key police officers who would every day go out into communities and create relationships, sort of bridging, demystifying our police department and really bridging these concerns, and really talking about, one, that we have a confidentiality policy in our city where people do not need to be afraid of disclosing to us their documentation status. We maintain that information confidential and we do not share it with federal officials. That we have a language access policy where we aim to serve people in the languages they most comfortably speak. What our police department learned was that there were ways to engage our communities that was more comfortable for them. So for some of our immigrant groups, it was through creating a soccer league. Some of our South Asian communities through a cricket league. So what you have in front of you is a picture of our former police commissioner, Ray Kelly, honoring the communities that we had a cricket league with. And that spoke magnitude. The other thing with this unintended consequence of this actually was that we created a pipeline of cadets, of individuals who joined our police department. So in fact, our police department is more diverse than we've ever imagined it to be, largely because of this outreach network. And so the outreach into these communities essentially created opportunities for parents to actually see and want their children to be part of our police department, where so many of these communities have said to us for so long, police in our country are not your friends. They're not there to protect you. They're the people we should be afraid of, right? Government in many of the countries that our immigrants come from, we're not there to help support them, but rather, in fact, we're the problems and why many have left. And so the opportunity for us on local government to reframe that is really important. On education, we wanted to make sure, and this is really focused on how do we get parents comfortably coming into the school community so that they know they're an incredibly important part of their child's educational success. So in front of you, you have an example of a card, a bookmark that we created to help parents participate in the parent-teacher conference process. We translated that bookmark and these questions into 10 different languages and made sure that we worked with our community partners to help our communities get them. The other reality is around our English language learner population. How do we help support our English language learner community? And how do we help our parents and communities, these students alike, feel welcome in our communities? And so you see a couple of examples of welcoming posters that we have in every single school in the city, and it demonstrates the 10 languages that are most commonly spoken in our school community. We created a similar I Speak card. The school system created it to honor that you're a parent and we know you speak a language other than English, and you can use that to get information and to have a parent-teacher conference in the language you're most comfortably speaking. And these are all tools that really focus on that really are born out of a policy, but really focus on creating a tone and a difference in our school communities and in our city, quite honestly, that honors who our communities are. Many of you might have this, but in our city we actually have not the greatest rates of success for English language learner students. We have a high dropout rate, and we don't see the graduation rates as well as we need to. And so we created this campaign, our school system created this campaign highlighting English language learner students who had come to this country in recent years and were able to graduate and go off to college. And we wanted to showcase this in our school communities and with our parents in particular, so that we were able to help support them, support their kids, to know that everyone can succeed. And so this idea of dreaming and believing and succeeding was a good one. Financial empowerment matters. We know many of our communities may not have an economic, do not have a relationship with a bank. How do we support them in knowing that they should have a financial identity, that we need them to thrive here? How do we connect them to opportunities? We in New York, for tax benefits, there's ways to get earned income tax credits. So we utilized the diversity of our communities and the linguistic reality and created campaigns to outreach to these communities. We also had a lot of challenges with some of our banks understanding the value and the assets of our immigrant communities. And so we actually created a financial services study looking at our new immigrant Latinos, specifically Mexican and Ecuadorian, and the Chinese community, specifically the Fujianese population. And as a result, we were able to see what some of the outcomes were. And you can see here, but these major findings have actually resulted in some very serious policy opportunities that we're now embarking on, or the city is now embarking on with major financial institutions. This is sort of some long-term stuff, but for many of you that might be in a place where the financial industry want to do something and want to invest, go to them. Figure out how you can work together to better support your community. Libraries, in our opinion, are community-based partners. They're really, really key in integration. And so in New York, here's an example of one of the shelves in one of our public libraries. And you can see the diversity of languages. But we know that libraries oftentimes are places where English language classes can happen. It's where families bring their children, both for their children's literacy skills development, but their own. And so the focus that we showcase here is one of our library systems in Queens, which is the most diverse county in the country. They have done everything from naturalization programs, to cultural programming, celebrating the diversity of our communities. And they don't get a lot of money to do this, but they do a really great work. They do really great work in engaging these communities, and as a result, it is a way that we can engage our immigrant communities. Again, with those Know Your Rights forums, we start to see who are leaders in the community. How do we get those leaders and cultivate them to take other leadership opportunities? How do we connect them? And so it has been an incredible journey here in New York. It behooves me to say there's still a whole lot of good work to be done. We are not experts at this, but I appreciate this title that was given to me as godmother. I'm honored and really I'm delighted. It's a community. I am the daughter of immigrants, and I watched my parents struggle through so much of this, which is what informed a lot of who I am and what I do. The three other blueprints that aren't featured here that I didn't rush through, so forgive me in advance. One is on health, both on the policy side of health and also the service delivery side. Another one is on family and child welfare, really on public benefits. One is on family and child welfare, so around the reality of domestic violence for our immigrant communities, and around foster care and child welfare, abuse and prevention of abuse. And so those are models that we were able to borrow from our city agencies that do that work. And the last one is on public benefits, food stamps and other opportunities to help your municipal government think robustly about creating programs and opportunities. All of the blueprints are available for you. They're free. They're accessible. nyc.gov/integration. You will find all of these. Please download them. Use them. They are open source. They're intended to be that way. I have to be honest and tell you, there's a new administration. My hope is that they will keep this project alive, but our colleagues at Welcoming America are key partners on this work. They have access to this. They have the authority to use these and use them over and over again. But we want you to use them. They really are intended for you. And so I have my email address up there. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to be helpful. And we really do encourage you to download them, use them, put them on your own portals. Cities of Migration is welcome to do that if we haven't talked about that already. But I'm happy to take questions. And thank you for the opportunity to share some of this work that I'm very passionate about with you.
Well, thank you so much, Fatima, for the presentation. And also, I encourage everyone who's on this webinar to really check out the blueprints, as they really can provide a starting point. And so now let me just ask a few questions before I turn it over to Kim, who will then take the questions also from the audience. And we have quite a large audience, which is of course really great. So on first blush, these blueprints can sometimes really feel overwhelming to smaller cities and newer gateways. And you pointed out that there are quite a few gateway cities. It's the same in Europe. There are more cities that are experiencing and just starting this work. Yet we know that the strategies that New York City used they're really all critical and applicable to many contexts. So how do you advise groups on what to tackle first, how to put a strategy in place, and how to get started when the task can just seem daunting or overwhelming?
Mm-hmm. So one, I think it's important that folks not get bogged down in the money question, because so many of us have resources that we can repurpose. I will honestly say that all of this work in New York did not happen overnight. It's been happening for over time. It's a continuum, and I would say a good amount of this stuff happened over 12 years. So if it doesn't get done for you in your respective cities in years, don't worry about it. It would be amazing if you could. But there are two things that most of us think about first when we think about change. And the first is to think about a needs assessment, right? I would encourage people to do an asset assessment as well. Right? What do you already do in your city? Like, do your needs assessment. Figure out what your critical needs are, and then itemize them. But then do an asset assessment, and then match those things. Because oftentimes, you already have a lot of the skill set and the talent and the resources you need to respond to some of those needs that exist in your community. And that, to me, are the low-hanging fruits. Start with that, and then create an opportunity that actually allows you to tackle each of these things. Your initial wins allow you to then go to others, to get support, to partner with different, unique peers that can do this work with you. Partnership is key in all of this work, and so don't think that you have to do this alone, which is why I think an asset assessment is quite critical. You need to figure out who are your allies, and what do they do, and how do they help support you do what you need to do for your community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Could you just clarify when you say asset assessment, could you give some examples of what you mean there just to make it more practical?
Absolutely. So from the local government perspective, do you have programs already that exist? Do you have English language programs where you have a natural audience for you to reach and survey? Do you have champions in local government that you know, whether it's your actual your own respective mayor or county leader, or do you have just different leadership across the city council members who you know are champions and that can be real allies in this work? So when I say asset assessment, I would say draw a line across key things, whether it's in what services you deliver, who are the voices that matter, who are the partners that you think are key to this, what are and then when you think of needs assessment, right? Where are the challenges? Are they in the public safety space? Are they in community unity, right? Is it in that welcoming? Are people being discriminated against? Are people being pushed out? Do people feel uncomfortable, right? So when I talk about assets, really think about all of the opportunities that may exist around where do people convene, your library systems. So some of these examples, and in fact in the blueprints we encourage different opportunities of figuring this stuff out, even around data. And then think about where are the needs? And then it's literally matchmaking. I mean, when I tell you I drew a graph to do this in my own job, we did, and it's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for elaborating on that. So as I'm also speaking for the European side, and you already touched on that it's always boiled down to the money or the budget, or that's when people or get started and think they can't do really much. But there are also ideas and projects that can be achieved with low or no budgets, and we've talked about this at prior meetings, such as the inventory of staff languages in New York City. And could you just share with the audience, I don't know if you can do that, but what was the budget for some of the projects in New York City, and what is your advice to all cities in times of economic distress that want to implement further integration projects?
So the secret is that in New York we actually had no money. And I know that sounds crazy, and most people say to me, "You're kidding." The truth is that our agency had staff. We had 5 staff, and through partnerships and opportunities, I was able to really triple my staff, but also really go to my peers. So when I was trying to help do the language inventory that Astrid mentioning was that NY certified. But before we ever did NY certified, we actually created something called a volunteer language bank. We basically encouraged all of the city employees who spoke a language other than English to volunteer their language skills. And we created a portal where folks could self-select and include themselves in that. What we realized was that we had 1,800 people who said they spoke all these languages, but we realized not everyone speaks that language so well, and should they be the person on the other side helping do an interpretation? And so that's when we created that second step. But partnerships across agencies, partnerships with community-based organizations are really critical because it's actually how we were able to do a good amount of work. And I say this because when I would meet with my peers who do education, and I would say, I'm meeting with you because I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. And they would say, that's really not our agenda. And then I would walk in and I'd talk demographics. Well, how can you say that's not your agenda? When X percentage of our student population are sit in our seats at our school, when the X percentage of students aren't graduating, we have a shared commitment here and a shared opportunity to work together. So I can bring what we can in terms of our technical expertise, but you have the human capital and the money, and why don't we do this together? And so part of it is thinking strategically about what you can bring from the perspective of whatever entity you speak from, and how do you find a peer that can sit across the table from you, which is why figuring out who your champions are really important.
Well, thank you. And I think this is also encouraging. I mean, it's not encouraging to hear that you didn't have any budget, but it's encouraging to hear that you, despite that, actually managed to do so many programs, and that it sometimes just takes some creative thinking. And as you said, thinking who are your champions and your allies, and how can you resort to their networks and their knowledge more creatively. So thanks for sharing that important point. Lastly, I wanted to ask a question. We all the cities, and as they're facing demographic changes, we're all trying to build more inclusive cities, and the welcoming cities approach that also Rachel shared, it strives to bridge differences between new and more established communities, involving the different actors such as businesses and community-based partners. So how did the city government of New York bridge those differences between the communities? Because I can imagine they're sometimes quite tense. And did you reach out to the other sectors in this endeavor as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the presentation I showed, there's this one photo of the mayor and several people standing behind him. So every year, a big amount of our work has to be in getting into and working with communities and really making sure that we are demonstrating an opportunity for folks to talk with one another and really celebrate our differences and celebrate our opportunities to work together. So every year we hosted an interfaith breakfast where we invited faith leaders from across the city. It was on December 31st every year. And we would say to these faith leaders, we thank you for your support and your prayers and your leadership in our community. One more year together, we've been able to make the city thrive and essentially use that in the sort of, it's a new year, a new opportunity. Together, all of us from all of our respective faith traditions can help better support our communities. And we would do it very carefully and mindfully to make sure we had all of these groups in the same room at the same time, talking to them, really celebrating the reality of who we are as a city. We also created several celebrations through the course of the year. In our office, we were charged with something called Immigrant Heritage Week, and we celebrated in April we would do this celebration of our immigrant communities. We've had our share of hate crimes and bias attacks. New York City is home to September 11th, where we had a tremendous amount of animosity towards our Muslim communities and perceived Muslim communities. When this quote-unquote ground zero mosque date unfolded, we saw it all over again. And that actually forced us to think very strategically about creating a One New York City campaign. So our One NYC, One Nation campaign was born of that, from that experience of really witnessing this divisiveness and this real tension in communities. The other opportunity was really not just those leadership, the leadership programs that I talked about. We actually had for the first time all of the same immigrant communities from neighborhoods sitting at the same time, almost for the first time meeting each other. And what was fascinating is when we brought these groups together, these folks would say, well, this is what the police said to us, and this is what, and you'd have someone else on the other side say, they say that to us too. I thought it was just my people that they did that to. And so you started to help people realize that in addition to their differences, there were great similarities, and that together, at a moment of opportunity and not at a moment of crisis, we wanted them to get to know one another so that if ever at a moment of crisis, they already had relationships in place and could help diffuse any challenges in a more productive and successful way. So this unity awards that we did, and there are lots of great ideas that even cities across the country and in Europe are doing, and really, really amazingly brilliant work that Cities of Migration brilliantly showcases. But there's a lot of opportunity. That isn't a lot of money. The other thing I wanted to say is your little wins in your community, you need to figure out a way to amplify that and showcase that and figure out how do you use that to help you get some money or support from business leaders, from religious leaders, from city agencies, from elected officials, from foundations and philanthropists. It's those little wins that you can demonstrate that really can, in fact, help support and supplement your work to a greater level. So don't be afraid to toot your own horn and to actually showcase your good work. Because you deserve it, number one, and number two, that's what actually really helps you get access to money and really and grow your opportunities.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your statements, and I want to be mindful of the time and turn it over to Kim again for our questions from the audience. And thanks everyone also for joining this webinar. And I really encourage you to check out the blueprints, but also the work of Welcoming America, as I do think that they really are doing a tremendous job and are so inspiring also to, of course, this side of the pond in Europe. And I'm glad that we got to know the new name, the godmother of immigration, from Fatima. Thank you.
I'm so humbled. Thank you.
It's very funny. Thank you, Fatima and Astrid, and thank you, Rachel. We've heard a really powerful story about city leadership and the power of local. We're going to shift now to some of the questions that have come in from the audience. One very good segue. One audience member writes, money always follows good ideas and not vice versa. Fatima's work is a testament to this, so that couldn't be more true. We've had a number of questions about some of the work you've done with immigrant entrepreneurs, whether the financial services study is available, and I think I can answer that they are and that we will make those links available to you. But the first question that I will share with you comes from ST, who asks whether Fatima or the City of New York has had conflict between federal levels of government and the city over policy. I guess they're referencing the situation with the undocumented. I think that local to national relationship is an interesting one. Another way, perhaps, to think about it is to ask you, Fatima, how higher, upper level, state and national levels of government have responded to the kind of leadership New York City is offering, and whether it's influencing those policy environments.
Great. Well, to no surprise, New York is fairly powerful, both in our voice and in our if you will, forgive me, in our stature, and so we really do a fine job, sort of the fun of my job, of manipulating local policy that better supports our communities, and really figuring out how to challenge in some ways the federal policies that might exist. The one thing that I think is really important, again, is that immigration is a federal issue and that immigrants are a local issue. And we would say this as often as possible. And, you know, Mayor Bloomberg, who was was the mayor in the city for 12 years, was number one, a huge advocate for immigrants, but also has been a very huge advocate and a huge voice on immigration reform and the need for immigration reform. And we in New York have a history of this. It's actually not just Mayor Giuliani before the mayor and Mayor Dinkins and Koch before. This is a bit of our history. We have had a really great relationship with the federal government on these issues and have been able to sit at the table, to be very honest, and negotiate some of these nuances, whether it's even secure communities and the fact that on the local level we have actually really thought about secure communities and the impact it has on our police department and our correction system, and how do we better think the policy as it works for us. And so we have gone back to the Department of Homeland Security and said, you know, here, we know this is what you're saying, but here's what we're going to do. And they've accepted that. We recently had a big disaster, Hurricane Sandy, that really devastated many of our communities. In order to be eligible for federal benefits, you have to have a Social Security number. Many of our communities were undocumented that were affected. And what did that mean? We were able to work with FEMA and talk through the fact that many of our mixed status families would in fact disclose a Social Security number. Would that inadvertently impact them? What would this mean? And so we have worked with the federal government, and I really want to encourage people to not be afraid to do that. Now, we do have a very progressive government in New York, and we have always had one, to be very honest. It's not new for New York, so I know that's what is the tone these days, but New York is a very progressive place, and on our state level, we have benefits that come down the pike that really just support the diversity of New Yorkers, and we really do say, you know, it doesn't matter, your documentation status doesn't matter. You're a New Yorker today if you've arrived 100 years ago or yesterday, and we really aim to serve you. And that has been our tone, and we've been able to utilize our own city tax levy dollars to better support programming and opportunities to make sure that any and every New Yorker has access to things. But that's a policy decision we've always made. And I would say that we honestly sit at the table with our state and federal partners to really talk through this. And rarely have we ever gotten pushback. We don't always get it in writing, but we definitely do have a handshake deal on many things. And
that's great.
I
have a question from Ratna Amidvar here in Toronto, who writes that she's particularly interested in city responsibilities relating to zoning, land use planning, and procurement. These are often overlooked aspects of integration and inclusion. And perhaps you could comment on New York City's work in these areas as they relate to integration.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. Because of leadership capacity, we actually saw a huge disparity in what was going on, and we also heard it from community leaders. I would say that that's probably an area we have a lot of work to do. Truth is that we have seen a real, our neighborhood and community development agenda is very much aligned to the success of Main Street. And some of our zoning realities and some of the land use has, in some instances, inadvertently impacted our immigrant small business owners, and in other instances, greatly benefited them. But that is a tension that exists that is a very big tension. One real example these days is we have rezoned a neighborhood that is filled with auto repair shops. Well, all of the auto repair owners and workers are immigrants. The rezoning, in fact, will result in new housing developments and space for small businesses. So the local elected official has been a huge advocate for what it's going to mean for immigrants that have been displaced and are now, that is not, I think there's some very serious community benefit solutions, but again, you have to know your champions and you have to make sure they're at the table arguing for you. Advocates matter, organizing matters, and we need to make sure that our immigrant groups are included, because that actually still is an area that I think is very appropriately noted as too often overlooked. I don't think we're there yet, quite honestly, in New York anyway.
So one more question as we come to the very end of our webinar. It's been a very rich hour, but I have another question from Ratna, who she'd like to know what are some of the best examples that you can give us about how the city has made a significant institutional or policy change which has actually changed the behavior of the city itself. Is there one shining example of how your work has changed the behavior of the city itself?
Oh wow, that's a hard one.
Big question.
You know, I would love to say that I think both our confidentiality policy and our language access policy really are now, really are part of the fabric of who we are as a city. And I think, I am blown away when I hear, someone, and I shouldn't be blown away. I should be very, I'm delighted, but I am proud to hear someone in a public hospital say, no, don't be afraid, we're here to serve you. Your documentation status doesn't matter, and we're, we will figure out a way to help you no matter what. And I think that I think that's part of who we are across New York City government, and I think that we need to do and make sure that we continue to amplify that forward. But I think that actually, I think it's a big part of who we are, and it's, I hope that it is really who we will always be. I think it's who we have been, but I think we have sharpened that. Leadership matters. The voice of celebrating our diversity and celebrating our differences truly, truly matters. And so when you have that voice coupled with real policy opportunities, you really do thrive, and you see your community thrive. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful session. We are at the end of our hour. We've got questions coming in about the community policing, about voting initiatives, about evaluation. These are all questions we'll have to take up in other webinars in upcoming learning exchange sessions. But thank you very much. We are at the end of the Q&A. Fatima, just in closing, I'd like to ask you a final question. You've left the Mayor's Office of Immigration Affairs for another fascinating new position with Brooklyn's Maimonides Medical Center. A health system like this has enormous potential and institutional agency to promote diversity and to contribute to a more inclusive culture in the city. So I guess what I'd like to know is if there's one thing about your experience in the Mayor's Office and the Blueprint Initiative that will sort of shape the work that you do in your future role in New York City's health sector, what would that be? What are you taking with you into this wonderful new opportunity?
Well, I think that there are, what I learned in government and what I learned from this entire experience, one is that we really do need to celebrate the human capital and the communities that we have around us, because they truly are the assets, and how do we turn those assets into tremendous opportunities. Hospitals, universities are big institutions that have tremendous social impact, but that also have tremendous community development responsibility. And so for me, I am excited to be part of an institution that truly has this potential. It's the largest employer in Brooklyn, which if it were a city on its own would be the fourth largest city in the country. It's 2.6 million people live in this borough. It's a sort of sub-city in the city of New York. And we have the potential to not only think about health in its sort of regular sense, but really think about wellness and whole, in its whole sense, as really community development, individual, personal development. And so I'm taking all of the thinking that I have had the pleasure of working on, whether it was on education, economic development, and public health and policy, and sort of the strain that runs through me is very focused on policy and advocacy, and really thinking about opportunity and how do we look at an institution like this and amplify opportunity for the communities that surround us, for the people that come to us for care, and then really amplify forward the intersections between health and wholeness, and really, and I think there's tremendous opportunity, and we see it in other places, and I'd really like to be able to do it here in New York City with this institution. So.
Well, thank you, Fatima. That is wonderful. We wish you well. I think your godmothering skills will and inspiration will travel well with you. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Astrid. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, audience. Our time has run out. On behalf of all of our participants, Maytree and Welcoming America, I want to thank our speakers, Fatima Shama and Astrid Ziebarth, for a wonderful session today. I'd like you all to imagine this excellent work being interpreted in your city, adapted by your organization, or changing the neighborhood that you live in. We'd like to hear your stories and share more good practice, so please stay connected.